The Ancestral Puebloans, often still referred to by the older term Anasazi, built their lives in the unforgiving beauty of the Four Corners region, where present-day Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico converge. It's a land of extremes: searing sun by day, freezing cold by night, towering sandstone cliffs and winding hidden rivers, dust-dry air, interrupted by sudden, violent summer rains. For centuries, this harsh landscape sustained a vast network of villages, towns, and ceremonial centers. Though the people themselves moved on long ago, what they left behind still speaks. Their story doesn't begin with cities. It starts in silence, somewhere around 2000 BCE. Small, scattered groups settled the high desert, slowly shifting from nomadic hunting and gathering to something more rooted, more permanent. Over generations, they mastered the art of desert farming. Corn, beans, squash, the classic trio, were coaxed from stubborn, rocky soil using irrigation ditches, floodplain techniques, and precise seasonal timing. Their earliest homes were simple, shallow pit houses dug into the earth. But time and innovation changed that. By around 750 CE, they began building above ground. Villages turned into clusters, sandstone walls and adobe mortar forming thick-walled rooms designed to trap warmth during the frigid nights and hold cool air during the punishing summer days. Some dwellings were modest, others, towering multi-story complexes, carved straight into cliff faces, stacked like honeycomb across canyon walls. Nowhere was this more striking than Chaco Canyon, in what's now northwestern New Mexico. From 900 to 1150 CE, it was a thriving ceremonial and cultural hub. Massive construction projects rose from the desert, great houses like Pueblo Bonito and Chetroketle. These weren't just towns, they were engineered masterpieces, aligned with solar and lunar cycles, connected by straight, mysterious roads that stretched across miles of empty land. Timber beams, tens of thousands of them, were hauled from distant mountain forests, carried hundreds of miles without the help of pack animals or wheels. The architectural precision of Chaco is still jaw-dropping. Walls layered with decorative bands, stones interlocked in careful patterns, whole structures lined up perfectly, with equinoxes and solstices, tracking the rhythms of the sun and moon. And Chaco wasn't isolated. Archaeologists have uncovered cacao from Mesoamerica, turquoise workshops, intricate pottery, and feathers from exotic birds. This was a culture, plugged into a vast network of trade and influence. But the Ancestral Puebloans were more than builders. At the heart of their communities were kivas, round, semi-subterranean ceremonial chambers used for storytelling, ritual, and decision-making. You'd climb down wooden ladders into the earth, reconnecting symbolically with ancestral origins. Fires burned at the center, smoke drifting up through carefully placed vents. Songs echoed off stone walls. These weren't just rooms, they were sacred spaces. Life here had a rhythm: agricultural cycles, communal gatherings, and celestial observances. The stars told stories. The land remembered them. Villages scattered across mesas and canyon floors once formed a vast web of connection, bound by shared beliefs, family ties, and trade. The Ancestral Puebloans didn't just survive the desert, they adapted to it with intention. They built check dams and stone terraces to trap precious runoff. They planted crops at different elevations, hedging their bets against drought. They read the land like a map written in dust and stone. But then, slowly, and sometimes suddenly, they began to leave. By the late 1200s, many of the great cliff dwellings and mesa-top settlements were abandoned. Why? No one knows for certain. Theories point to extended droughts, dwindling resources, internal shifts, or rising conflict. Some sites show signs of a swift, final exit. Others suggest a quieter, more gradual departure. But make no mistake, this wasn't a disappearance. It wasn't extinction. The descendants of the Ancestral Puebloans are still here, Their bloodlines continue among the Hopi, the Zuni, and the Pueblo peoples of New Mexico and Arizona. These communities maintain deep cultural and spiritual connections to the ancestral sites. To walk among these ruins is not to walk among ghosts, it's to walk on sacred ground. The silence isn't abandonment. It's respect. Places like Mesa Verde, Bandelier, and Canyon de Chelly don't feel like dead history. They feel remembered, lived in. Even if the full stories are lost to time, the connection remains. Mesa Verde in Colorado stands as one of the most iconic of these locations. Towering sandstone cliffs drop away into sheltered alcoves, where entire villages were built beneath massive overhangs, protected from the elements, concealed from plain sight. Cliff Palace, the crown jewel of the site, holds more than 150 rooms, and 20 kivas, all arranged in a graceful arc against the canyon wall. Its scale is humbling. But it's the intimacy that lingers. Ceilings blackened by centuries of fire. Doorways carved just wide enough for a person to step through. Standing there, you can almost hear the echoes. Footsteps, laughter, the hum of daily life carried on the breeze. Nothing about this place was flashy. Everything about it was functional, efficient, deeply intelligent. The people here knew their world intimately. They carved narrow handholds and toeholds into sheer cliff faces, routes that today would challenge even trained climbers. They stored water in natural cisterns. They farmed high, dry land. Their lives were woven into the land itself, not imposed on it. The artifacts they left behind paint a picture of vibrancy and skill. Painted pottery in red, black, and white with sharp geometric patterns. Intricate weaving. Jewelry crafted from shells and turquoise. Corn sealed in clay-lined cysts. Tools worn smooth from generations of use. They were not an isolated people. They were engineers, farmers, astronomers, artists, storytellers. And yet, so much of their story remains just out of reach. Without a written language, their history is something we have to read through the ruins, the oral traditions, the very landscape itself. It's an archaeology of feeling as much as of fact. What makes the ancestral Puebloans so haunting is how present they still feel. Unlike ancient cities buried under jungle or paved over by modern life, much of their world remains open to the sky. You can walk their paths, touch the stones they laid by hand, sit in the same cool alcoves where fires once crackled in the dark. Even though their voices have gone quiet, the feeling of presence remains, a kind of living stillness, a whisper in the wind. And the mystery? It's not just in why they left. It's in how clearly we can still feel that they were here. How much of their lives survive without words, without scrolls or statues or epic poems. And yet, the ancestral Puebloans left behind something unmistakably human, etched into stone, shaped in earth, carved into the cliffs they once called home. The way they adapted, thrived, and eventually moved on, it's all there. Not in language, but in the spaces they chose, in the shapes of their dwellings, in the silence they left behind. As we begin this journey through lost civilizations, the ancestral Puebloans remind us that mystery doesn't always come in the form of a collapsed empire or a vanished king. Sometimes, it's quieter. A footprint worn into sandstone. A kiva left intact. A trail disappearing into a canyon with no clear answer to where it leads. While they carved their lives into the cliffs of the American Southwest, far to the south, high in the cloud forests of the Andes, another civilization was rising from the mist. Less famous, more remote, just as captivating. The Chachapoya, known to the Spanish as the Cloud People, a name that still lingers like fog clinging to the mountainsides. They lived in the upper reaches of the Andes, in what is now the Amazonas region of northern Peru. Their world was nothing like the desert, canyons of the Puebloans. This was a wet, tangled wilderness, steep slopes wrapped in moss, trees dripping with moisture, valleys swallowed in mist. The terrain was rugged, relentless. But in the middle of it, perched on ridgelines and clinging to cliffs, are the remains of a people who found a way to call it home. The Chachapoya began to emerge around 800 CE, maybe even earlier. But unlike the Inca or the Moche, they didn't build vast empires or sprawling road systems. They weren't a centralized power. Instead, they lived in a constellation of hilltop settlements, fortified towns, and isolated outposts, each uniquely adapted to the impossible landscape around them. And yet, despite their remoteness, they left behind one of the most haunting legacies in the Andes. At the heart of it is Cuelap, a site sometimes called the Machu Picchu of the North. But that comparison doesn't quite do it justice. Cuelap is a fortress city built atop a high ridge, 3,000 meters above sea level. Its massive stone walls soar up to 60 feet high, encircling more than 400 circular buildings. From a distance, it looks like a dream, or a mirage, a city in the clouds wrapped in mist and vine. But unlike Machu Picchu's polished stonework, Cuelap feels raw, monumental, defiant. Many of its stones weigh several tons. The entrances are narrow and funnel-shaped, not made for beauty but for defense. This was a place built to endure. Inside the walls, the buildings are almost all circular, low doorways, narrow passageways, niches cut into the stone. Some feature decorative friezes, zigzags, diamonds, serpent-like patterns, set right into the masonry. There's artistry here, but it's subtle, woven into the structure itself. No one knows exactly what the symbols carved into Chachapoya walls meant. Zigzags, diamonds, serpent-like lines. They repeat across settlements, hinting at shared beliefs or a system of meaning we still don't fully understand. Whatever they signified, they mattered. They were placed with care, and they echo across the landscape, long after their creators vanished into history. Despite its size and complexity, Cuelap remained hidden from the outside world until the mid-1800s. It wasn't archaeologists or explorers who found it. It was local farmers. By then, the jungle had already begun to reclaim the stone. Trees grew through the walls. Vines covered entire buildings. The forest knew how to take back its own. Since then, Cuelap has been slowly studied, restored, and reopened. But much of it remains untouched, wrapped in greenery, heavy with silence, still holding secrets. What makes the Chachapoya especially compelling isn't just their architecture, it's their place. Balanced right on the edge of history. They lived at a crossroads, both geographically and culturally. To the west lay the great coastal civilizations. To the east, the vast untamed Amazon, still largely a mystery even today. And in the 15th century, history came for them. The Inca Empire, expanding and relentless, pushed into Chachapoya territory. But the Cloud people didn't go quietly. Spanish chroniclers, writing after the conquest, described them as fierce, independent, unwilling to bow. They were among the last to be conquered by the Inca, and the first to rebel. Their homeland was nearly impossible to hold, thick with jungle, broken by cliffs, threaded with hidden paths and high stone fortresses. Even after they were absorbed into the Inca world, they remained difficult, defiant. A people of the fog and forest, always slipping just beyond control. Even after they were pulled into the orbit of the Inca Empire, the Chachapoya were never fully subdued. And when the Spanish arrived in the 1530s, some Chachapoya communities saw an opportunity. They didn't view the Spaniards as saviors, but as a means of shaking off the empire that had taken their independence. But that alliance came at a terrible cost. The Spanish brought more than weapons and horses. They brought disease. And like so many indigenous cultures across the Americas, the Chachapoya were devastated by waves of smallpox, measles, and influenza, illnesses they had no immunity against. Within just a few generations, their population collapsed. Communities scattered, the language vanished, rituals faded, much of their history was lost. What remains is stone and bone. Archaeologically, the Chachapoya are perhaps best known for their burial practices, eerily beautiful, deeply moving, expressions of a culture's relationship with death. Across vertical cliff faces and hidden caves, they left behind the remains of their dead, sometimes mummified, sometimes entombed, always placed with care. Some were buried in sarcophagi shaped, like standing figures painted with human faces, their arms folded across their chests. These forms were often lined up on narrow ledges hundreds of feet above the valley floor, quiet sentinels watching over the landscape. Other burials were tucked into natural cavities, sealed with stone and mud, and left hidden for centuries. These weren't graves meant to be forgotten. They were meant to remain, visible, watchful, protective. The dead weren't pushed away from the world of the living. They remained part of it. One of the most haunting examples is the sarcophagi of Karagia, towering, anthropomorphic figures built directly into a cliff face. Over 2 meters tall, they look almost like statues at first, but they're hollow. Each one contains a body, wrapped in cloth, standing upright. Their faces are stylized, calm, blank, timeless. Wind and rain have battered them for centuries, but still they stand, gazing out over the valley. Elsewhere, archaeologists have found hundreds of mummies, carefully packed into stone tombs. Some are curled in fetal positions. Others sit upright, arms crossed. Many are still wrapped in layers of burial cloth, preserved by the cold, dry air of the high Andes. The preservation is extraordinary, but the feeling is what lingers. These burials weren't haphazard. They were intimate, ritualized, reverent. We don't know exactly what the Chachapoya believed about death. Their myths are lost. Their language is gone. But everything they left behind, how they placed their dead, where they placed them, suggests a worldview where death wasn't an ending. It was a presence, a continuation. And in some places, that presence still lingers. To hike through Chachapoya country is to step into a landscape that hasn't quite let go of the past. Trails wind through thick forest, past moss-covered terraces and fallen walls. Trees grow from rooftops. Birds cry out through the mist. And every so often, you come across something. A worked stone, a hollowed-out niche, a half-collapsed figure, whispering of a world that once was. The Chachapoya didn't disappear in a single moment. They faded slowly, quietly. Their civilization was overtaken not just by empire, but by time, forest, and silence. What remains are the things they built, the places they chose, the presence they left behind. The symbols remain, etched in stone, carved into jade, repeating across artifacts like whispers from another time. The Chachapoya are mostly gone, but not completely. Their names echo faintly in the writings of others, and the unmistakable feeling still lingers when you walk through those high, mist-shrouded places. Someone was here. Someone lived well before. The forest returned. For all that has been lost, the Chachapoya left behind a landscape rich with story. And while we may never recover the full picture of who they were, their presence continues to haunt the ridgelines and the valleys of the Andes, not loudly, but clearly enough to be heard. Olmec builders. From the clouds of the Andes, we now move north, into the dense green jungles of ancient Mesoamerica. Along the humid Gulf Coast of what is now Mexico, another civilization emerged, older than the Maya, older than the Aztecs. And just as mysterious. The Olmec often called the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. Though that title is increasingly debated, there's no question the Olmec laid the groundwork. They were among the first to build massive ceremonial centers, to craft intricate religious iconography, and to shape a visual style that would echo through centuries of art and belief.